One sunny afternoon in early June of 1981, a day filled with the promise of summer, a profound and horrifying mystery began to unfold within the bustling terminals of Denver International Airport. For 5-year-old Lily Vance, it was meant to be the start of a grand adventure, a journey to visit her grandparents across the country. But for her mother, Eleanor, those fleeting moments of joy would shatter into an agony that would stretch across 3 decades, an unbearable silence finally broken by the glow of a modern phone screen. 33 years later, a mother's enduring love would uncover a digital echo of a life she thought was forever lost, revealing a truth more complex and heartbreaking than she could ever have imagined. How is it possible that the relentless decades-long search of a grieving parent, supported by countless efforts, could be outsmarted by a simple scroll through social media? Stay with us until the very end of this extraordinary story to discover the shocking details of how a family torn apart by a devastating disappearance found an improbable path back to each other, and the unforeseen challenges that followed their reunion. You will not want to miss a single moment of this captivating journey. If you appreciate real-life mysteries that delve deep into the human spirit, be sure to subscribe to our channel and activate notifications so you do not miss any new cases. And please tell us in the comments, from what city are you watching this video? We are curious to know where our community is spread around the world. The air inside Denver International Airport hummed with a vibrant, restless energy on that June afternoon. Overhead, the rhythmic announcements of departing flights mingled with the excited chatter of travelers, creating a symphony of anticipation and farewells. Eleanor Vance, a woman in her late 20s with kind eyes and a determined set to her jaw, gently adjusted the strap of her carry-on bag. Beside her, her 5-year-old daughter, Lily, bounced with an uncontainable joy, her bright red sneakers practically glowing against the dull airport linoleum. Lily's golden blonde hair, tied in 2 bouncy pigtails, swayed with every excited movement, catching the sunlight streaming through the vast windows. She clutched a worn, beloved teddy bear named Barnaby, its once fluffy fur now matted from countless adventures and comforting hugs. Their destination was a small town in rural Georgia, where Eleanor's parents awaited their annual summer visit. It was a pilgrimage Lily looked forward to all year, filled with promises of lemonade stands, firefly chases, and stories whispered under a star-strewn southern sky. Eleanor had spent weeks preparing for this trip, packing Lily's favorite dresses, a stack of new coloring books, and a special collection of bedtime stories. Every detail was meticulously planned, every possible scenario considered, a testament to Eleanor's slightly anxious but deeply loving nature. She had chosen this early afternoon flight specifically to avoid the late-day rush, hoping for a smooth and uneventful journey. The airport itself, in 1981, was a labyrinth of open spaces and bustling corridors, far less secured and surveilled than its modern counterparts. Passengers roamed freely, security checks were minimal, and the sense of public access was palpable. This very openness, a symbol of freedom and connection at the time, would, in retrospect, become a chilling backdrop to the events that were about to unfold. Eleanor smiled down at Lily, who was now intently examining a brightly colored poster for a tropical vacation. The innocence in Lily's wide, curious eyes was a constant source of wonder for Eleanor. Little did she know, this precious, fleeting moment of ordinary happiness was about to be irrevocably shattered, plunging them both into a nightmarish reality from which there seemed no escape. The gate area for their flight to Atlanta was bustling, a microcosm of the larger airport's controlled chaos. Families with young children, business travelers with briefcases, and excited vacationers mingled, their voices creating a low, constant murmur. Eleanor found 2 seats near a large window overlooking the tarmac, where ground crew scurried around a massive aircraft, preparing it for departure. Lily, ever fascinated by the world around her, pressed her nose against the cool glass, her small finger tracing the path of a tiny baggage cart. Barnaby, her teddy bear, was clutched tightly in her other hand, a silent companion on all her adventures. Eleanor, after ensuring Lily was engrossed in the spectacle outside, reached into her carry-on for the small bag of snacks she had meticulously prepared. As she rummaged, her gaze drifted toward a small television monitor mounted high above a newsstand across the concourse. A breaking news report flickered across the screen, its urgent tone catching her attention. It was a story about a recent political development, a topic that usually held her interest. For just a moment, her focus narrowed on the moving images, her brow furrowing slightly in concentration. It was only a few seconds, perhaps no more than a minute, a fleeting lapse in her otherwise vigilant watch. In that brief interval, Lily, with the boundless energy and curiosity of a 5-year-old, spotted something that piqued her interest even more than the planes. Just a few feet from their seats, a small display rack, normally holding tourist brochures, had been temporarily set up with a collection of brightly colored, inflatable beach balls. They glowed with an irresistible allure, a kaleidoscope of primary colors calling to her. Without a word, assuming her mother was still watching the planes with her, Lily simply wandered the short distance towards the shimmering display. Her little red sneakers made barely a sound on the carpeted floor. She was just within arm's reach, her tiny fingers outstretched towards a vibrant yellow ball, her back to Eleanor. It was a simple, innocent movement, an exploration typical of a curious child, yet it would mark the precise moment when the fabric of their lives began to unravel. Eleanor, still captivated by the flickering news report, remained unaware of the silent, momentous shift occurring just behind her. The hum of the airport continued, oblivious to the quiet, terrifying prelude to a mother's worst nightmare. Eleanor finally pulled her eyes away from the captivating news report, a lingering thought about the unfolding political drama still in her mind. A sigh of contentment escaped her lips as she reached for the snack bag, ready to offer Lily a juice box and a handful of crackers. Her hand brushed against empty air. Her eyes immediately darted to the spot where Lily had been just moments before. The bright red sneakers were gone. Barnaby, the faithful teddy bear, was nowhere to be seen. A cold, sickening dread began to crawl up her spine, a feeling she would come to know intimately in the years ahead. "Lily?" she called out, her voice a little too high, a little too strained. No answer. Her gaze swept frantically across the concourse, her heart beginning to pound against her ribs. The colorful display of beach balls caught her eye. She saw nothing but their vibrant hues, no small figure lingering nearby. She moved quickly, her steps becoming urgent, her eyes darting between faces, searching for that familiar splash of golden hair or the bright red of those tiny shoes. Panic, raw and unyielding, began to claw its way up her throat. "Lily!" she cried again, louder this time, her voice cracking with terror. People turned, their expressions shifting from indifference to concern. The airport's ambient hum, moments ago a comforting sound, now seemed to mock her, a cacophony of normal life continuing while her world tilted on its axis. She pushed through a small group of waiting passengers, her breath catching in her throat, a cold sweat breaking out on her forehead. The vastness of the terminal, once a symbol of open possibility, now felt like an enormous, indifferent maw. She ran towards the newsstand, then to the nearest gate, calling Lily's name with increasing desperation. Each empty space, each uninterested face, was a fresh stab of fear. The few seconds she had been distracted stretched into an eternity of agonizing realization. Her mind raced, replaying the last moments, trying to pinpoint exactly when Lily had slipped from her sight. Had someone taken her? Had she simply wandered off, too curious for her own good? The questions screamed in her head, each one more terrifying than the last. Eleanor's vision began to blur. Her legs felt like lead, but she pushed onward, her frantic search intensifying. This was not a dream. This was a nightmare unfolding in broad daylight. And Lily, her sweet, innocent Lily, was gone. The world, for Eleanor Vance, had just stopped. The minutes that followed Lily's disappearance blurred into a chaotic, terrifying whirlwind for Eleanor. Her frantic cries for Lily soon caught the attention of airport staff, then a security guard, and finally, airport police. The initial response was a mix of sympathetic urgency and bureaucratic slowness. Descriptions were taken: Lily's height, her bright red sneakers, her golden pigtails, the worn teddy bear named Barnaby. Every detail Eleanor could recall in her state of shock. A fuzzy black and white photo from Eleanor's wallet was quickly copied and distributed. The airport, vast and sprawling, became a terrifying maze under the intensifying search. Announcements blared over the loudspeakers, a disembodied voice calmly asking for any information regarding a missing 5-year-old girl named Lily Vance, last seen near Gate 32. Each repetition of the announcement felt like a fresh stab to Eleanor's heart, an official declaration of her worst fear. Police officers then, in their rudimentary uniforms of the early 1980s, systematically began to comb through terminals, question passengers, and check bathrooms and service areas. But in an era before ubiquitous surveillance cameras and advanced tracking systems, their efforts were largely dependent on human memory and the limited technology available. Eleanor was led to a small windowless office, the sterile air doing nothing to calm her racing pulse. She recounted the moments leading up to Lily's disappearance over and over again, each retelling agonizingly painful. The television news report, the brief distraction, Lily's fascination with the beach balls. The police officers, though outwardly reassuring, betrayed a subtle impatience with the lack of concrete information. There were no witnesses who saw Lily being taken, no clear, suspicious figures, just a few feet, a few seconds, and Lily was gone. As the afternoon bled into evening, and the evening into a long, agonizing night, the initial surge of activity began to wane. The airport, though still operating, quieted. The search, once so immediate and widespread, narrowed, becoming more methodical but less hopeful. Eleanor's husband, Robert, arrived, his face a mask of shock and disbelief, having rushed from his office after Eleanor's tearful, incoherent phone call. They sat together in a cold waiting room, clinging to each other, listening to the hollow echo of the gate announcements, each one a reminder of the flight Lily would never take. The first cold night without Lily descended, wrapping the Vance family in a shroud of unbearable silence and the terrifying empty space where their daughter used to be. The relentless, gnawing certainty that something truly terrible had happened settled deep in Eleanor's soul, a premonition that would haunt her for decades to come. The immediate frenzied search for Lily gradually faded into a hollow, persistent ache that settled deep in Eleanor's bones. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and then months into years, each one marked by the stark, unbearable absence of her daughter. The initial flurry of police activity at Denver International Airport dwindled, eventually becoming a cold case file gathering dust in a distant office. Robert, Lily's father, tried to hold their lives together, but the silent chasm left by their missing child grew wider, testing the very foundations of their marriage. He would often find Eleanor staring blankly at Lily's empty bedroom, a room meticulously preserved, a heartbreaking shrine of untouched toys and faded drawings. Eleanor became a woman consumed by a singular, relentless purpose: to find Lily. Her mornings began not with coffee, but with calls to police departments across the country, following every whisper of a lead, every tenuous connection. She joined support groups for parents of missing children, finding a bittersweet solace in shared grief, but often leaving with renewed despair as other cases remained unsolved. She learned to navigate the labyrinthine world of missing persons databases, poring over grainy photographs and terse reports, always searching for a glimmer of recognition. Every vague sighting reported in a distant state, every anonymous phone call ignited a flicker of desperate hope within her, propelling her to travel hundreds, sometimes thousands, of miles, only to face the crushing disappointment of a false lead. Her home, once filled with Lily's laughter and the joyful clutter of childhood, became a quiet, somber place. Eleanor cooked mechanically, slept fitfully, and spoke little. The vibrant woman she had once been, full of life and plans, slowly receded, replaced by a shadow haunted by what-ifs and unspoken questions. Her relationships suffered under the immense weight of her grief and obsession. Friends, unsure how to comfort her, gradually drifted away. Robert, though equally devastated, struggled with Eleanor's all-consuming pursuit, longing for a return to some semblance of normalcy, a path Eleanor simply could not see. He tried to offer comfort, to pull her back from the precipice of her despair, but her focus remained unyielding, fixed on the impossible task of finding a ghost. The empty chair at their dinner table, the unworn winter coat in the closet, the tiny shoes by the front door, each item served as a brutal, constant reminder of the life that had been snatched away, an echoing silence that filled every corner of their existence. The years stretched on, marked by the slow, painful erosion of hope, leaving behind only the stark, unyielding truth of Lily's absence. Years bled into a new decade, and then another, carrying with them a relentless cycle of hope and crushing disappointment for Eleanor. It was in the late 1990s, nearly 2 decades after Lily's disappearance, that a flicker of light appeared in the oppressive darkness. Eleanor, now a figure known among local missing persons advocates, received a call that sent a jolt of adrenaline through her weary heart. A volunteer from a small grassroots organization in a remote part of Oregon believed they had a lead. A girl, roughly the right age, living in a quiet, isolated community, matched a grainy, faded photograph of Lily from the airport. The details were vague. The resemblance only suggested. But it was enough. It was more than enough for a mother who had clung to every wisp of possibility for so long. Eleanor, against Robert's cautious advice, booked the first available flight. The journey felt surreal, a dream she had replayed countless times in her mind. Each mile covered brought a surge of exhilaration, followed by a cold wave of doubt. What if it wasn't her? What if this was just another cruel mirage? Yet, the possibility, however slim, was a powerful magnet. She imagined Lily grown, a young woman with memories she didn't share, a life she hadn't been a part of. The thought was both intoxicating and terrifying. Upon arrival, guided by the local volunteers, Eleanor found herself in a small, unassuming town nestled deep within a forest. The air was crisp, the silence profound, a stark contrast to the cacophony of the airport where Lily had vanished. The girl, whose name was Sarah, lived with a family who had adopted her as a young child. They were kind, welcoming, and clearly confused by Eleanor's intense scrutiny. When Eleanor finally saw Sarah in person, a wave of familiar disappointment washed over her, chilling her to the bone. Sarah had Lily's general build, the same color hair, but her eyes, though kind, lacked the specific spark, the unique shape that Eleanor had memorized in every waking and sleeping moment. The small scar near Lily's left eyebrow was absent. The subtle, almost imperceptible way Lily tilted her head when she was curious. It wasn't there. The family provided adoption papers meticulously documented and seemingly legitimate. The more Eleanor learned, the more the fragile hope that had sustained her throughout the journey began to crumble into dust. This was not Lily. This was another girl, another family, another life entirely unconnected to her decades-long agony. The return journey was heavier, the silence in the plane's cabin amplifying the hollowness in her chest. This was not just a disappointment. It was a psychological blow, a reaffirmation of the vast, indifferent void into which Lily had disappeared. Each false dawn like this chipped away at her resilience, leaving deeper scars, making the already arduous journey of grief even more desolate. Yet, somewhere deep within her, a stubborn ember of hope, though faint, refused to be extinguished. As the calendar pages turned from the 1990s to the early 2000s, the world around Eleanor underwent a seismic shift. The nascent whispers of the internet, once a niche curiosity, blossomed into a burgeoning global network, forever changing how people connected and information was shared. For Eleanor, who had for so long relied on physical travel, phone calls, and the slow grind of bureaucratic systems, this new digital frontier represented an unexpected, if initially intimidating avenue for her relentless search. She had little experience with computers, her life having been devoted to the analog pursuit of a missing child, but the sheer desperation to find Lily propelled her forward. With Robert's patient, albeit sometimes exasperated guidance, Eleanor began to learn the bewildering language of the internet. She navigated clunky search engines, joined early online forums dedicated to missing persons, and discovered nascent social media platforms. Their interface is clunky and unfamiliar. This new digital world offered a deceptive promise of instant answers, a vast ocean of information at her fingertips, yet it also presented new frustrations. Sifting through countless irrelevant posts, enduring the emotional toll of online scams and false claims, and grappling with the impersonal nature of digital communication became a new layer to her daily agony. Yet, she persisted, driven by an unyielding maternal instinct. Her days, already long and shadowed by grief, now extended late into the night. The glow of the computer screen became her silent companion, illuminating her weary face as she meticulously typed Lily's name into search bars, examined fuzzy online photos of unknown children, and read through heartbreaking stories of other families' unresolved disappearances. She uploaded Lily's aged photograph to nascent missing children websites, hoping against hope that someone, somewhere, might recognize her grown face. The internet offered a scale of reach that had been unimaginable in 1981, allowing her to broaden her search beyond state lines and national borders with a click of a mouse. It was a lonely pursuit, often yielding nothing but dead ends, and a deeper sense of isolation amidst the vastness of the digital world. Still, in the quiet hours, as the rest of the house slept, Eleanor clung to the flickering hope that somewhere in this new, interconnected universe, a tiny, almost imperceptible digital thread might finally lead her back to Lily. The year is now 2014. 33 years had painstakingly carved their mark onto Eleanor Vance, transforming the once vibrant young mother into a woman whose eyes held a deep, persistent sorrow. Her once golden hair was now streaked with silver, and the lines around her eyes spoke volumes of the countless nights spent in quiet desperation. The internet, which had once felt like a strange new frontier, had become a mundane part of her daily routine, a familiar landscape she navigated with a weary efficiency. Every morning, after a cup of tea, she would settle into her armchair, tablet in hand, and begin her ritualistic scroll through various social media platforms, forums, and missing persons groups. It was a habit born of an unyielding hope, yet often fueled by nothing more than the cold comfort of routine. On a quiet Tuesday afternoon in late October, as autumn leaves painted the trees outside her window in hues of crimson and gold, Eleanor was aimlessly scrolling through Instagram. The platform, still relatively new to her, was a dizzying mosaic of fleeting images and brief updates from friends and distant acquaintances. Her fingers moved mechanically, her mind half present, half lost in the familiar haze of a life shaped by absence. She had long since ceased to expect any breakthroughs from these daily digital patrols. They were simply a way to pass the time, to feel as though she was still actively searching, even when all logical hope had withered. Then, amidst the stream of vacation photos and curated self-portraits, a particular profile picture flickered onto her screen. It was not a professional photograph, but a casual snapshot seemingly taken outdoors, perhaps at a park or a garden. The woman in the image had a warm, genuine smile, her eyes crinkling at the corners with what appeared to be true happiness. Her hair was a rich, dark brown, a striking contrast to Lily's blonde curls, but it was the shape of her face, the curve of her jawline, and most unsettlingly, the uncanny familiarity of her eyes that instantly seized Eleanor's attention. They were a vivid, piercing blue, almost identical to the shade Eleanor saw every time she looked in the mirror, and strikingly similar to the eyes that gazed back from the faded photographs of her missing 5-year-old. A profound, unsettling sense of recognition, sharp and instantaneous, shot through Eleanor. Her heart, long accustomed to a steady, melancholic rhythm, suddenly lurched, then began to pound with a force that made her dizzy. She stopped scrolling, her thumb hovering over the screen, trembling slightly. This was not the usual fleeting resemblance that her mind often conjured in moments of intense longing. This was different. This was visceral. The woman's smile held a subtle asymmetry, a slight tilt to the left that Eleanor vividly remembered. It was a detail only a mother would recall, a unique quirk that had delighted her years ago. She leaned closer to the screen, her breath catching in her throat, scrutinizing every pixel. The name displayed beneath the photo was Holly Peterson. It was not Lily Vance. Yet, the conviction that seized Eleanor was absolute, undeniable. A cold certainty, chilling and exhilarating all at once, enveloped her. This was more than a coincidence. This was more than a wishful projection of her grief-stricken mind. This was a direct, undeniable echo from the past, reverberating across 33 years and countless miles, manifesting on a glowing screen in her quiet living room. The name was different, the life seemingly foreign, but the eyes, those unmistakable luminous blue eyes, could only belong to one person. Could it truly be her? Could this digital flicker, so casually stumbled upon, be the answer to a prayer uttered countless times, across a lifetime of aching loss? The possibility, so audacious, so improbable, felt terrifyingly real. The screen of her tablet seemed to pulse with an almost supernatural energy in Eleanor's trembling hands. The name, Holly Peterson, stared back at her, a seemingly mundane collection of letters that now held the potential to either shatter her world completely or finally piece it back together. With a newfound, almost terrifying resolve, Eleanor delved deeper into the profile, every click of her finger a step further into the unknown. The initial quick glance had been based on instinct. Now, a more methodical forensic examination began. Holly Peterson's profile offered glimpses into a life that seemed utterly complete, filled with friends, family gatherings, and hobbies. There were photos of her laughing with what appeared to be her parents, a smiling couple in their 60s, their expressions radiating warmth and affection. Pictures of holidays, birthdays, and casual weekends filled the feed, painting a picture of a normal, happy existence. There were no obvious signs of a turbulent past, no shadows hinting at a secret history. Yet, Eleanor's intuition, honed by decades of agonizing search, screamed that this was not just a random internet encounter. She scrolled back through years of posts, searching for anything, any detail, no matter how small, that could confirm or deny the impossible possibility. She found a photo taken at a beach, Holly in a swimsuit, her back to the camera. Her focus immediately zeroed in on the left shoulder blade. There, just visible, was a faint, irregularly shaped birthmark. Eleanor's breath hitched. Lily had a similar mark, a faint, almost invisible patch of discolored skin, a tiny map of her earliest days. It wasn't a common mark, and its presence sent a fresh wave of chills down Eleanor's arms. Then, buried within a gallery of childhood photos, tucked away among images of school plays and birthday parties, Eleanor found another clue. It was a picture of a young Holly, perhaps 7 or 8 years old, proudly displaying a hand-knitted blanket. The colors were muted, a mixture of blues and greens, but the pattern was unmistakable, a series of interlocking geometric shapes that formed an abstract landscape. Eleanor's mind reeled back in time. Just before they left for the airport that fateful day, Lily had been obsessed with a book of optical illusions, particularly one abstract drawing that depicted a hidden scene within a series of interlocking lines. Eleanor, a skilled knitter, had promised to make Lily a small blanket with a similar pattern, a promise she had never been able to fulfill. Could this blanket be Lily's own childhood creation, or something given to her that echoed a lost memory? The detail was too specific, too niche to be mere coincidence. Another post caught her eye, a throwback picture from a high school reunion where Holly was quoted saying something about our quirky little club that met in the library after school, obsessed with ancient mythology and secret codes. Lily, even at 5, had an unusual fascination with hidden messages and made-up languages, a habit that always amused Eleanor. This seemingly innocent comment, innocuous to anyone else, resonated with a profound depth for Eleanor, stirring dormant memories of Lily's unique, imaginative spirit. The accumulated evidence, circumstantial yet deeply personal, was overwhelming. The birthmark, the patterned blanket, the peculiar interest in codes. These were not random details. They were echoes of her daughter, subtle whispers across 3 decades. Eleanor felt a terrifying mixture of exhilaration and dread. This woman, Holly Peterson, living a seemingly complete life, thousands of miles away, could be her Lily. But what did that mean for Holly? For the family who had raised her? And for Eleanor herself, after so many years of aching void? The enormity of the discovery, the potential for both immense joy and unimaginable pain, began to settle upon her, a heavy, yet strangely hopeful, burden. The long, agonizing wait was possibly over, but the true challenge was only just beginning. The digital thread connecting Eleanor to Holly Peterson, a woman who might be her long-lost Lily, was incredibly fragile. Decades of crushing disappointment had taught Eleanor a brutal lesson. Hope, if embraced too quickly, could inflict the deepest wounds. This time, she would proceed with an almost surgical precision, guided not by raw emotion, but by careful, deliberate strategy. She knew that a sudden, unannounced message, screaming, "I think I'm your mother," could be catastrophic, potentially alienating Holly forever, or even causing her immense psychological distress. Eleanor understood that Holly, if she truly was Lily, had lived a complete life under a different identity, with a different family, entirely unaware of the gaping hole she had left behind. Eleanor reached out to a specialized online support group she had been a part of for years, a tight-knit community of parents who had miraculously reunited with their missing children after decades. They offered guidance, not just on the technicalities of tracing a person, but on the delicate emotional landscape of such reunions. They emphasized patience, empathy, and the critical importance of allowing the found child to process the shocking revelation at their own pace. The advice was unanimous. Do not ambush her. Establish a subtle, non-threatening connection first. After several days of agonizing deliberation, crafting and recrafting her words, Eleanor decided on a simple yet profoundly meaningful approach. She sent Holly a private message through Instagram, not directly accusing or revealing, but rather expressing a polite curiosity. Her message was brief, respectful, and carefully worded to pique Holly's interest without causing alarm. Eleanor referenced the hand-knitted blanket she had seen in Holly's childhood photos, mentioning that she recognized the unique pattern from an old knitting magazine she used to own. She added that she had always admired such intricate designs and found herself wondering if there was a story behind it. The message closed with a simple, friendly remark about appreciating Holly's online content, maintaining a casual, innocuous tone. It was a small, calculated risk. The blanket was a deeply personal detail, one that tied into Lily's fascination with patterns and Eleanor's own unfulfilled promise. If Holly truly was Lily, perhaps something about the message would resonate, a subconscious echo of a deeply buried memory, or at least a natural curiosity about how a stranger recognized such a specific item. If it was not Lily, the message was harmless, easily dismissed as a random inquiry from a fellow crafter. Eleanor knew she might not receive a reply. She also knew that a reply, if it came, could be the first tremor of an emotional earthquake that would redefine both their lives. The agonizing wait for a response began, each passing hour a testament to the immense, unwavering hope that had sustained her for 33 long, silent years. The digital flicker had become a fragile flame, and Eleanor guarded it with every fiber of her being. Days turned into a week, each moment for Eleanor stretched taut with anticipation. Then, finally, an alert flickered on her tablet. A new message on Instagram. Her breath caught in her throat as she opened it. It was from Holly Peterson. Holly's initial response was polite, even a little amused. She acknowledged Eleanor's comment about the blanket, expressing mild surprise that a stranger would recognize such a specific pattern. She mentioned that the blanket had been a cherished childhood item, a gift from her adoptive mother, and that she didn't know much about its origins beyond that. Her tone was friendly, unsuspecting, a normalcy that both comforted and terrified Eleanor. Eleanor replied, keeping her own message brief and unassuming, weaving in another subtle, almost subconscious detail that only Lily might vaguely recall, a specific, unusual brand of colorful children's clay they used to play with, or a particular, oddly shaped stone they had found in their old backyard garden. She was planting seeds, carefully, gently. Holly's responses grew less frequent, but more curious. The subtle details Eleanor wove into her messages, seemingly innocent observations about childhood hobbies or unique interests, began to resonate with Holly on a deeper, more unsettling level. She found herself experiencing odd flashes of memory, fragmented images that didn't quite fit with the narrative of her upbringing. A distinct scent, a particular children's song, a fleeting image of a bright red shoe. These tiny, inexplicable fragments would surface, causing a prickle of unease. She mentioned these to her adoptive parents, who dismissed them as childhood imaginings or dreams. However, Eleanor's persistence, cloaked in polite inquiries, eventually led to a direct, yet still cautious question about Holly's adoption. Eleanor, guided by her support group, explained that she was a volunteer for an organization dedicated to helping adoptees connect with their birth families, and that she sometimes recognized patterns of adoption through unique details. It was a half-truth, but a necessary one to open the door further. Holly's world began to shift beneath her feet. She had always known she was adopted, a fact her loving parents had never hidden. They had painted a picture of a straightforward legal process, an adoption agency, and a smooth transition into their family. But as Eleanor's questions, gently probing, began to touch upon increasingly specific, almost intimate details Holly herself sometimes felt a vague, inexplicable connection to, a growing sense of disquiet settled in her mind. She started asking her adoptive parents more pointed questions, pressing them for specifics that they seemed hesitant to provide. Their answers became evasive, their discomfort palpable. The story they had always told her, so clear and simple, now felt riddled with omissions, clouded by an unspoken history. The unease ripened into a gnawing suspicion. Holly's adoptive parents, faced with her persistent inquiries and the unsettling precision of Eleanor's questions, finally revealed a difficult, incomplete truth. They admitted that her adoption had not been through a traditional agency. They had been approached by an intermediary, a person who claimed to be a distant relative of a young mother who, due to tragic circumstances, was unable to care for her infant. There were few official documents, mostly handwritten agreements, and a hurried exchange of money. They had been told the birth mother wished to remain anonymous, seeking only to give her child a better life. They swore they believed the adoption was legitimate at the time, that they had acted out of love and a desire for a child, never questioning the less than formal process. They had suppressed the more uncomfortable details, wanting to protect Holly from a potentially painful origin story. This revelation shattered Holly's foundational understanding of her own identity. The love she felt for her adoptive parents was immense, unshakable, but the ground beneath her feet felt suddenly unstable. The seemingly perfect narrative of her life had a dark, unspoken chapter. Eleanor, sensing Holly's internal turmoil, finally proposed a meeting, not as a mother to a daughter, but as one woman to another, to share information that might help piece together some family history. The setting was a neutral coffee shop halfway between their two cities. As the day of the meeting approached, Eleanor was a storm of nerves and desperate hope. For Holly, a different kind of storm raged, one of confusion, betrayal, and a terrifying, dawning realization that her entire past, everything she believed about herself, might be a carefully constructed illusion. The air between them, across the miles, was thick with unspoken questions, with decades of silence waiting to finally break. The coffee shop hummed with the usual afternoon chatter, the clatter of cups and the low murmur of conversations forming a backdrop to a moment of monumental significance. Eleanor sat at a small table, her heart a frantic bird in her chest, watching the entrance. Every passing face was scrutinized, every new arrival met with a fresh surge of adrenaline. When Holly finally walked in, her gaze sweeping the room with a slight nervousness, Eleanor knew. It was the same bright blue gaze she had seen in the Instagram photos, but now it was alive, present, and brimming with an unfamiliar mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Their initial interaction was a delicate dance of politeness and barely contained emotion. Eleanor, remembering the advice from her support group, maintained a calm, steady demeanor, allowing Holly to set the pace. They spoke of superficial things at first: the weather, the drive, the ambiance of the coffee shop. But beneath the veneer of casual conversation, an electric current of unspoken questions crackled between them. Holly, though composed, betrayed her internal turmoil with subtle gestures, a constant adjustment of her bracelet, a slight tremor in her hand as she lifted her coffee cup. Eleanor began to weave the narrative, starting with her decades-long search for her missing daughter, Lily. She spoke of the day at Denver International Airport in 1981, the fleeting moment of distraction, the agonizing realization. She described Lily's golden pigtails, the worn teddy bear named Barnaby, the specific birthmark on her shoulder, and even Lily's unique fascination with patterns and hidden messages. Each detail was offered not as an accusation, but as an offering, a piece of a puzzle Eleanor hoped Holly might recognize. As Eleanor spoke, she observed Holly's reactions with painful intensity. She saw a subtle flinch at the mention of the airport, a fleeting flicker of recognition in her eyes at the description of Barnaby, and a visible intake of breath when the birthmark was described. Then, Eleanor gently transitioned to the Instagram profile, the uncanny resemblance, and the details that had compelled her to reach out. She explained her volunteer work, the carefully constructed half-truth, before finally admitting the overwhelming conviction that had driven her. Holly listened, her face a mask of complex emotions, confusion, shock, and a dawning, terrifying understanding. Eleanor placed a faded photograph of 5-year-old Lily on the table between them, next to a more recent picture of Eleanor herself, taken specifically for this meeting. Holly's eyes darted between the two faces, then back to Eleanor, then to the images of her own adoptive parents on her phone, which she had quietly placed on the table. The silence stretched, thick with the weight of 33 years. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Holly confirmed the existence of the birthmark. She spoke of the hand-knitted blanket, admitting it was indeed a gift from her adoptive mother, who had always said she just found it at a bazaar. She also revealed the fragmented, dream-like memories that had occasionally surfaced throughout her life, a vivid flash of red shoes, the faint echo of a woman's desperate cry, an odd fascination with planes taking off, despite never consciously remembering being near an airport as a very young child. These were the echoes, the subconscious whispers that Eleanor's initial messages had brought to the surface. Then came the agonizing revelation of Holly's true adoption circumstances. With a heavy heart and a face etched with a newfound pain, Holly explained the fragmented story her adoptive parents had shared. A woman, seemingly distressed and desperate, had approached them through a casual acquaintance, claiming to be unable to care for a very young child. This woman, it was revealed, had worked at the airport that day, perhaps in one of the gift shops or a service area. She had seen Lily briefly, perhaps even interacted with her, finding her charming and seemingly unattended for a moment while Eleanor was distracted. Believing the child to be neglected or even abandoned in the chaos of the airport, perhaps driven by a misguided sense of rescue or a desperate loneliness of her own, the woman had taken Lily. There was no grand criminal conspiracy, but rather a tragic convergence of circumstances. Eleanor's momentary lapse, the airport worker's impulsive, deeply flawed decision, and the subsequent informal exchange with Holly's future adoptive parents, who, in their desire for a child, had not questioned the dubious nature of the arrangement deeply enough. The adoption had been shrouded in secrecy, a desperate, misguided attempt to do what they thought was right, which slowly cemented into an illegal act, the truth carefully hidden for decades. The truth, when it came, was not a Hollywood twist, but a profoundly human tragedy of circumstance, misjudgment, and the devastating ripple effect of a single, impulsive act. Holly's world had been turned upside down. Her adoptive parents, whom she loved dearly, had kept this monumental secret, protecting her from a truth that now felt like a gaping wound. For Eleanor, the raw, unfiltered account was both a validation and a fresh wave of grief. Her Lily had been taken not by some monstrous stranger, but by someone who, in a twisted way, thought they were helping, setting in motion a chain of events that had stolen decades of life from both mother and daughter. The fragmented truth lay between them, raw and exposed, the beginning of a long, arduous journey toward understanding and, perhaps, healing. The revelation in the coffee shop was not an ending, but a shattering beginning. For Eleanor, the decades of agonizing uncertainty had finally given way to a fragile, overwhelming truth. For Holly, her entire identity, built on the solid foundation of a loving adoptive family, had been upended, revealing a hidden, traumatic origin. The immediate aftermath was a maelstrom of raw emotion, a delicate dance between the profound joy of reunion and the deep, unsettling pain of betrayal and lost time. Holly returned home to a strained household. Her adoptive parents, though deeply remorseful, struggled with the weight of their long-held secret, now exposed. Their love for Holly was undeniable, pure and unwavering. But the trust, so fundamental to their relationship, had been fractured. Holly, grappling with the knowledge that her entire childhood had been built upon an omission, found herself navigating a complex emotional landscape. She loved the parents who had raised her, who had given her a life filled with stability and affection, but she could not ignore the profound sense of loss for the life that had been stolen from her, the biological family she had never known. The woman who had taken her from the airport, driven by what seemed like a twisted form of compassion, remained elusive, her role in the tragedy a haunting shadow. The circumstances surrounding her initial removal, though understandable in a human sense, left a bitter taste. Eleanor, meanwhile, felt a different kind of burden. The initial euphoria of finding Lily quickly gave way to the daunting reality of a 33-year gap. The little girl she remembered was a woman she barely knew, a stranger with familiar eyes. She had missed every milestone. Lily's first day of school, scraped knees, teenage heartbreaks, graduations, perhaps even first loves. These were years she could never reclaim, moments that would forever remain empty spaces in her maternal heart. Robert, Lily's father, joined Eleanor in a tearful, overwhelming video call with Holly, the distance making their joy and sorrow even more acute. He too grappled with the complex emotions, finding a grown woman where he had only ever seen a 5-year-old. The process of rebuilding bridges was slow, painstaking, and often painful. Eleanor and Holly began cautiously, with frequent phone calls and video chats, gradually easing into in-person visits. They shared stories, Eleanor recounting fragmented memories of Lily's early childhood, hoping to spark recognition, and Holly sharing tales of her life, her childhood joys, her passions, her dreams. It was an exercise in patience and empathy, each woman learning to respect the other's journey, acknowledging the unique challenges they both faced. There were moments of frustration, periods of silence, and flashes of anger. Anger at the circumstances, at the choices made, at the vast emptiness of the lost years. Holly, in time, began a parallel journey of integration. She learned to reconcile her love for her adoptive parents with the dawning truth of her origins. She grappled with the idea of having two mothers, two families, and the intricate, often contradictory emotions that came with it. Her adoptive parents, with time and immense effort, began to process their own feelings of guilt and fear, slowly opening up to the possibility of shared love, acknowledging Eleanor's rightful place in Holly's life. The story of Lily Vance, now Holly Peterson, does not end with a tidy, picture-perfect reunion. Instead, it concludes with the beginning of a complex, ongoing process of healing and connection. It is a testament to the enduring power of a mother's love, a beacon of hope that flickered for over 3 decades, refusing to be extinguished. It illustrates how even in the face of insurmountable odds and the cruel passage of time, the threads of family connection can, against all logic, find their way back to one another. The journey was not over. It was simply entering a new, challenging, yet profoundly hopeful chapter, where two lives, once tragically separated, were slowly, tentatively, being woven back into a shared tapestry.